There are 5 objections that every financial advisor hears, and if you don't know how to handle them, you're losing clients you should be closing. I need to think about it, or I already have an advisor, your fees are too high. I've heard every single one of these hundreds of times over my 30-year career, and I can tell you exactly why they say them and exactly what to say back. I'm going to give you all 5 objections and the exact responses that work in this video. So, like I said, I've been in financial services for nearly 30 years now, and I've sat across from hundreds of prospects, and I'm going to tell you something that no sales training will teach you. Every single one of these objections has the same root cause. That's right, same root cause. And once you understand that root cause, you'll never fear objection again. But before I give you the 5 objections, I need to tell you why you're hearing them in the first place. Because if you don't understand the root cause, you're just going to be memorizing scripts. And believe me, scripts don't close. Here it is. Whenever you don't anchor the prospect's real desire to the solution you're providing, there's going to be a disconnect. That cognitive dissonance is the reason for all 5 of these objections and any others you'll ever hear for that matter. So let me say that again. If the prospect's deepest desire, their real reason for being in the room with you, is not clearly connected to what you're offering, they will object every time. Because in their mind, there's a gap between what they need and what you're selling. And remember, what we've talked about in previous episodes, people are driven by 3 things: safety, relationship, and significance. If your conversation hasn't tapped into at least one of those, hopefully all 3, you haven't given them a reason to move forward. And they're gonna find any excuse not to. That excuse comes from these 5 objections that you hear over and over and over again, okay? So now that you know the root cause, let's go through each one. Objection number 1, I need to think about it. Now, this is the most common objection in the history of financial advising, I believe. And here's what it actually means. You haven't created enough urgency for me. If people are driven by safety, significance, and relationship, and your conversation hasn't established that not solving this problem has real consequences for one or more of those 3, then of course they need to think about it. Because in their mind, nothing bad's going to happen if they wait. There's no cost to delaying. So here's what I say. I completely understand wanting to take your time. Can I ask you this though? What specifically do you want to think about? Because if there's something I haven't addressed or something that doesn't feel right, I'd rather we talk about it now so you have everything you need to make the best decision for you and your family. Now, what this does is 2 things. First, it surfaces the real objection behind I need to think about it. Because 9 times out of 10, there's something specific they're not saying. And secondly, it reframes the conversation from let me escape to let me get clarity. And clarity is what closes. But the deeper fix is upstream. Here's what I mean by that. If you've connected your solution to their deepest desire, if you've shown them the consequences of doing nothing, most people never say, I need to think about it in the first place. On to objection number 2. I already have an advisor. Great. So why are we talking? I'm serious. That's the question. If someone already has an advisor and they're in a conversation with you, they are at minimum 1% curious or 1% disgruntled or 0.1% unsatisfied. Something brought them to this conversation and your job is to find out what that something is. So here's what I would say. That's great. I'm glad you're already working with someone. Can I ask this? What made you open to having this conversation today? That's it. You're not attacking their current advisor. You're not competing. You're simply asking them to tell you what's missing and then listening. And they will tell you, trust me, because if nothing was missing, they wouldn't be talking to you. Once they tell you what's missing though, you have to anchor your solution to that gap. Now you're not the replacement. You're the answer to the thing they've been quietly unhappy about. Objection number 3, your fees are too high. Well, compared to what? That's the first question because too high only exists in comparison, right? And here's the reality. The industry standard for advisory fees is somewhere between 0 and 3%. So if you're anywhere south of that 1.5% median, your fees are not too high. The prospect just doesn't see the value yet. So that goes right back to the root cause. If you haven't anchored their desire to your solution, fees will always feel too high because they're comparing your fee to nothing. They're comparing your fee by intrinsic value only, not the perceived value of what they will get in this transformation. In their mind, The intrinsic value has little to do with their problem. It does not equate solutions to them. However, the perceived value, let's go back to this total value again. This intrinsic value down here, the perceived value here though, is what you want to focus on. This happens when you help them understand the cost of not having a plan, the cost of making the wrong tax move, or the cost of running out of money in 10 years into retirement. So here's what I always say. I hear you, and I want to make sure this makes sense for you financially. Can I ask this? When you think about the fee, what are you comparing it to actually? Because what I want to make sure is that you're not comparing the cost of working with me to zero, because the real comparison is the cost of what happens if you don't get this thing right. Now, when you shift the comparison from your fee versus nothing to your fee versus the cost of inaction, the conversation changes completely. Hey, quick pause. If you're watching this and realizing that the way you handle objections needs some work, I want you to know something. How you handle these depends on the kind of advisor you are. Your archetype, a relationship-driven advisor, handles your fees are too high, completely different than an analytical, technical advisor. I built a free assessment that will tell you which of the 6 archetypes you are so you can handle objections in a way that's authentic to you, and it only takes 5 minutes. Link is in the description. Now back to the episode. Okay, objection number 4. I'm not ready yet. Now, this is a cousin of I need to think about it, and it has the same root cause. There's no urgency, but it's slightly different because it's not about the decision per se. It's about timing. They're telling you the problem isn't urgent enough to solve right now. So there's a saying out there. It says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time? Today. Your prospect knows this intellectually, but they don't feel it yet. So here's how I handle it. I totally respect that. Timing does matter. Can I show you something real quick though? Let me show you what happens if you start today versus if you start 2 years from now or delay. Because the math doesn't care about timing, my friend. It only cares about time. And then I pull up a projection. I show them the cost of delay in real numbers. You know, the trips they won't be able to take, the retirement gap that widens every year, the insurance premium that goes up with every birthday. When I'm not ready yet meets real numbers, it rarely loses. So you're not pressuring them, you're educating them. There's a difference. And when they see the numbers, they typically come to their own conclusion and decision. Objection number 5, how are you different than XYZ firm? Now, this is a comparison trap that most advisors fall right into. They start listing their features, their products, their people, their process. Well, we're fee only, we're fiduciary, or we use this type of custodian or this type of technology package. And they think they're differentiating themselves, but you're not. You're commoditizing yourself. Because from a product standpoint, most advisory firms look the same.
So we do better when you do better.
From at least the outside. Same custodians, same funds, same planning software, same fee structures. If you try to differentiate on those widgets, you're gonna lose every time. So here's what you do instead. I don't compare products. I show that I care. Since we know people are driven by safety, significance, and relationship, the real answer to how are you different is never gonna be about your platform. It's always gonna be about your investment in their outcome. So if you said something like, that's a fair question. Here's what I can tell you. I can't speak to what they do or how they do it. What I can tell you is that my clients hire me because they feel like I'm in their corner, not just managing their money, but really understanding their life. So if you give me permission, what I'd love to do is show you what that looks like, and then you can decide for yourself if it's indifferent. That way you're not bashing the competition. You're not comparing features. You're inviting them into a relationship. And that's the one thing that no other firm can replicate. Let me be real with you. Early in my career, these type of objections used to rattle me. I need to think about it, or your fees are too high. It felt like rejection. It felt I was taking it personal. And I would go home replaying the conversation in my mind all the time, kind of wondering what I did wrong. What changed was when I stopped trying to overcome the objections and I started trying to prevent them altogether. When I started anchoring every conversation to the client's deepest desire first, the objections almost disappeared. Not because I got better at selling per se, but because I got better at understanding. And the objections I do still hear, they don't bother me as much anymore. because I know they're not about me. They're about a gap in understanding that I can close in the next 30 seconds or so if I ask the right question or questions. I want to give you one more thing. If you want to stop hearing objections entirely, you need better discovery questions. And the best resource I've ever found for this is a book called Life Planning for You by the great George Kinder. Kinder has his 3 questions that I now use in every single first meeting with a slight variation. And when you use them though, you get into the prospect's deepest desire in the first 15 or 20 minutes. Questions like, if you had all the money you ever need, how would you live your life? Or if you found out you only had 5 to 10 years to live, what would you change right now? When someone answers those questions honestly, you don't have to guess what they want. They told you. And when you anchor your solution to that answer, objections evaporate because you're not selling a product anymore. You're building a bridge from where they are to where they just told you they want to be. Here's your takeaway. Hopefully, every objection is a symptom. The root cause is always the same. You haven't anchored their real desire to your solution. Fix that and you won't need any more scripts. You won't need comebacks. You'll need a calendar because your schedule will be so full. 5 objections, 1 root cause. Now you know both. Now, if you want to take this further to the next level and figure out how to handle objections in a way that's authentic to your specific advisor archetype, then take the free assessment. It takes 5 minutes. There's 6 archetypes and the link is in the description. And by the way, drop me a comment and tell me, which of these 5 objections do you hear the most? I'll tell you exactly what to do about it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'll see you in the next one, my friend.